Congressman, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so happy to have you with us. Um, you are the proud representative of a good chunk of Los Angeles County, including Sherman Oaks, which is a lovely place where we've had several events with you, all talking about disability employment issues. And I know you just came from the House floor, and so we are going to briefly take a break from our panelists and give you the honorable gentleman from California has the floor. So,
thank you, and thank you so much, Phil. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Congressman Brad Sherman from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks, and I represent most of the San Fernando Valley in the United States Congress. I'm delighted to be with you today to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I want to talk about economic success and independence for people with disabilities. These are challenging times for everyone in our society. We face a pandemic, overdue demands for racial justice, and of course, we just saw the economic numbers today with a huge decline in our GDP. These past months have forced many to improvise, to adapt, to change our ways. These are things that people with disabilities have had to do forever. In addition, for years, disability advocates have been calling on employers to embrace the idea of working from home. Now, because of COVID, more and more businesses have joined the telework revolution. I'm here to talk to you about the impact of ADA and the Community Reinvestment Act, which I believe can help people with disabilities and is in the area that I focus on as the Financial Services Committee for the last 24 years. Today, Respectability and other groups are gathering advocates, public officials, and experts to talk about the 30-year legacy of the ADA. The ADA was an unprecedented step forward to declare an end to discrimination and to provide full citizenship for all people with disabilities. Yet the ADA is only one of the tools available in our toolbox for making our nation a more just country for those with disabilities. The Community Reinvestment Act, also known as the CRA, is another such tool in the toolbox. It was signed back in 1977 and is a primary part of bank regulation in our country. It was designed to encourage banks to meet the needs of borrowers who have been targets of discrimination and areas that have been subject to redlining. The law has existed, of course, for 43 years to help low and moderate income neighborhoods through retail banking and community development. As one of the senior members of the House Committee on Financial Services, I work to ensure that laws like CRA help the traditionally discriminated against groups. Those are, of course, people of color, but also people with disabilities. At this point, you may be wondering what the CRA has to do with people with disabilities. According to the National Disability Institute, 60% of adults with disabilities have low or moderate income, and that means they tend to live in neighborhoods that count as low or moderate income communities under CRA. Historically, the CRA has not included people with disabilities as a discrete category of people who need financial support and aid from our banking system. However, recently, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the OCC, one of the federal agencies that enforces the CRA, has put forward proposed revisions to its regulations. Under these proposals, banks subject to OCC oversight, which is a huge chunk of the commercial banks in our country, will now be recognized and be given CRA points toward compliance for lending activity that benefits people with disabilities. Now, there are other parts of this proposed regulation that I may have concerns with, but I commend the work of the OCC to recognize the financial needs of people with disabilities and the businesses that serve them. These changes move the ball forward on including people with disabilities under CRA and our other civil rights statutes, and opens the chance for greater inclusion in the future. Under the new rules, banks that are now specifically encouraged to lend to businesses that meet certain needs will be encouraged to lend to businesses to improve accessibility to their facilities, to lend to public libraries that accommodate patrons with disabilities, and to lend for the construction and rehabilitation of rental housing to accommodate people with disabilities. These and other changes to CRA mark an important milestone. Consider that CRA has been the law of the land for, of course, many decades since 1977. This is the first time it is focused on the needs of people with disabilities. And it is about time that we recognize the 56 million or more Americans with disabilities that need access to credit services and community investment dollars. It's going to take further updates and improvements in this policy in order to achieve our objectives. We also see in the new CRA rules provisions encouraging banks to train their staffs to recognize and work effectively with people that have executive function issues and other disabilities. If you're going to support efforts to reintegrate citizens and to get them back into the workforce and back into our economic system, then you need to recognize that they may have distinct needs. This includes learning and mental behavior health disabilities. Now I want to pivot and talk about what might happen if more people with disabilities could get the financial capital they need. How many more people with disabilities could invest in making their homes accessible? How many entrepreneurs with disabilities might move to use new technologies and to invent products that will help other people with disabilities? Just imagine the possibilities if banks and businesses better met the needs of people with disabilities, particularly those living in low and moderate income communities. I believe that we've made important progress toward this goal. I look forward to continuing to work to ensure that people with disabilities are not overlooked and their needs for banking, investment, and other financial services are met. At the start of my remarks, I mentioned entrepreneurship among people with disabilities. For some with disabilities, due to discrimination or just due to personal preference, they find that starting their own business is the best way to earn enough money to live independently. It's, of course, tougher in this pandemic and this recession, but success can happen. A key tool for success for people with disabilities can be entrepreneurship. Before this pandemic started, we don't have up to the minute statistics on this for our current situation, but I hope that 2021 has a lot in common with 2019 and not in common with our current situation. Before this pandemic started, 1 in 10 workers with disabilities were their own bosses. That's right, 10% of all Americans with disabilities that had jobs, their job was entrepreneur. The flexibility that comes with being a small business owner can be a great choice for people with disabilities who want to earn an income. I'm an old CPA, so I'll focus on a success in my own profession. One of the big 4 audit firms that you may have heard of is Ernst & Young. Its founder, Arthur Young, was deaf and had low vision. No one would hire him, so he went out and launched his own CPA firm. Today, Ernst & Young is a global enterprise with more than 150 different countries with almost 250,000 employees. Best of all, they're a leading employer of workers with disabilities. Likewise, the CEO of FUBU and the Shark Tank star Damon John struggled in elementary school and was not given appropriate support for his learning disabilities. Yet he has gone on to build his own fortune. Richard Branson is another entrepreneur with disabilities who has reshaped the global face of business. Business people with disabilities, from Stephen Hawking, that unlocked the secrets of the universe from a wheelchair, to Thomas Edison, who was deaf. People with disabilities can be great innovators, problem solvers, and entrepreneurs. One of my own constituents, Sean McElwood, manages a t-shirt business called Shawnees. Sean, who has Down syndrome, starred in the A&E television show you may have watched, Born This Way. I met with Sean, and he's even testified to Congress about how running your own business can be a path to success for people with disabilities. I mention these names because I believe that if people with disabilities have a chance to showcase their talents and invest in their home communities, they can help us transform this nation. Even with all the darkness in 2020, there's clear cause for hope. 30 years ago, when the ADA became law, the high school graduation rate for students with disabilities was only 45.7%. For the year 2018, the high school graduation rate for those with disabilities was 67%. Now, that's not where we need to end up, but that shows significant progress. In 1990, the employment rate for people with disabilities was only 28.7%. By 2018, that had risen by 10 percentage points. We've, of course, lost ground in this crisis. Every community has lost ground in this crisis. But the success we had in the first 29 and a half years after the passage of ADA shows what we can achieve, and hopefully at a much quicker rate as this country reopens. I'm grateful, and we should, of course, not reopen until we can do so safely, but that is another issue. I'm grateful to Respectability's chairman, Steve Bartlett, the Honorable Steve Bartlett, former member, who helped lead, who was a lead co-author of the ADA when he was in Congress. And I want to thank Jennifer Laszlo Mizrahi, who's been my friend for over 2 decades and founded Respectability. I'm deeply grateful to everyone who is watching this now for their commitment to a better future with people with disabilities. Together, we can fight stigmas, advance opportunities, and provide for capital and entrepreneurship. I'm Brad Sherman from America's Best Named City, Sherman Oaks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Congressman.
Mr. Chairman, this is Steve Bartlett. I watched intently and listened. Thank you very much. I'm on with you. Thank you. I want to say to our listeners, and we have several thousand on this call, Brad Sherman is a real stalwart on disability rights and financial services in the Congress, and we thank you for your leadership in that. He is not just a congressman, although there's no such thing. He's the chair of the House Financial Services Subcommittee on Investor Protection, Entrepreneurship, and Capital Markets. Note the themes that he also is involved with disability work. So, Brad, thank you very much for your leadership.
Thank you.